meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority to order. I want to welcome all of you to in the audience. Thanks for showing up. We start our authority meetings by a call to order, roll call, and determination of a quorum.
Chair Pulitz,
Present.
Vice Chair Norvell,
Here.
Treasurer Rogers,
Here.
Member Flint, Member Golden,
Here.
Member Horton, Member Hutter. A quorum is present.
Okay, thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. How about Curtis? Lead us, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Curtis. I'm assuming that all the board members have read the minutes of our past meeting of the Airport Authority. And I would like someone to make a motion to approve the minutes from last month.
I move that we approve the minutes from last month as presented.
Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Approval of the minutes of, the modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items. Items may be taken out of order, items may be combined for consideration by the authority, and items may be pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. That being said, I've decided to pull from the agenda item H3, which is the discussion of possible action to consider bids received in response to the solicitation for a fixed base operator, FBO, to manage airport-owned tie-downs on the northern ramp. We just determined that we don't quite have enough information at this time, and the board members weren't fully understanding of all the details associated with it, so we're going to clean that up a little bit so we can come back and do it correctly the way we feel that we're all in the same understanding. So that'll be pushed to another meeting. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the airport authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for a future airport authority meeting. The public may provide public comment in advance of a meeting by written submission to the following email address, manager@flycarsoncity.com. For inclusion or reference in the minutes of the meeting, your public comment must include your full name and address, be submitted via email by not later than 5 p.m. the day before the meeting. The Carson City Airport Authority values your input. Members of the public who wish to provide live public comment may do so during the designated public comment periods indicated on the agenda in person. First on the agenda is the airport engineer's report. Oh, was there any comments before we start from the public? Nope. Okay.
All right. So for the record, Brian Martinez-Smolis with Wood Rogers. Just two things to report on. One is the ASIP, which I know is an agendized item, so I'll leave that for that, and we can answer questions as needed there. The other item is one of the first projects, just an update on the RSA drainage improvements project. So environmental is through FAA review, and there was a report that FAA forwarded off to SHPO, and so once we get approval from that, we should be able to proceed with getting grant funding from the FAA. So that project is moving through, and we're hopeful to get started on that soon.
Well, thanks, Brian.
Any other questions? Good.
Questions from the board? Yes, John.
Could you talk a little bit about SHPO's involvement?
I'll do my best. I'm not the greatest environmental approvals person, and really the environmental stuff is being completed by Kaufman and Associates, who's the airport planner. But long story short, it is like a historical element. So there's some cultural reports that were prepared. The FAA gets concurrence, and then it goes to SHPO for final approvals.
Anything else? Thanks, Brian. Okay, we don't have any, yes, sir.
Corey, what can you tell us about the SRE building?
Okay. So I do have some information from Armstrong. The SRE building. So it says here pending special use permit renewal that was actually approved last night. So the special use permit is officially approved for that item. I attended that meeting and there were some questions about it. And I also brought attention to the fact that the airport cannot have wildlife attractants on the airfield. So our landscaping, it looks a little different than a traditional building construction like this would, but we do have all of that defined in the special use permit, and it will be also going to planning department for approval. Made sure to bring attention to that because honestly, I think I may need to address this. The airport should not be held to the same landscaping requirements as development off airport, and that's always going to be an issue. But it was approved, so that is moving forward. Building permit is pending the approval of the special use permit, so that should hopefully be approved soon, and we'll be able to plan to move forward. Unfortunately, because of the timing, we probably will not see it built before we start to get winter, probably tonight. So this will probably not start until after winter due to how the timing fell. They did include information on 2 other items. The aeronautical survey for nighttime approach, offset PAPI construction. The flight check dates are to be determined by the FAA. We have received the agreement and we've approved the agreement as well as the expense for that evaluation of the PAPI construction. And there was a question about whether or not they were actually doing an evaluation for nighttime use, and that was clarified. That's obviously the whole reason we're doing this to begin with, and they didn't define that very well, so we got that cleared up. And they will be, of course, evaluating it for nighttime use. We have acquired the snow removal equipment. We accepted delivery October 28th. And that grant is pending closeout, which the FAA can't process until the spring because there actually will be an amendment to that grant to include the additional expenses that we incurred due to the issues with the receipt of the snowplow. But the FAA has verbally expressed that they will consider the amendment and approving it. So the additional expenses we incurred will hopefully be entirely covered by the grant. This was a 100% grant because it was originally during COVID. And so this is a pretty big win for us to get all of our administrative expenses covered for this grant. And that is all that Armstrong submitted.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay. There are no consent agendas items on this in this meeting, so we're going to move on to the public hearings. Agenda item H1 for discussion and possible action. Approval of airport lease amendment for the South FBO lease held by Mountain West CXP LLC to release approximately 17,000 square feet for the airport to use for a taxi lane and to extend the lease for an additional 8 years in return. Staff summary?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this one. Steve Takis, Airport Council. Preliminarily, I would note that Member Golden is an owner of Mountain West and has indicated already to me he will not be participating as a member of the Airport Authority on this item, but there's nothing to prohibit him from coming to the other side of the table and answering any questions you have on it. That said, the basic situation is this. We have that parcel of property that's on the frontage road on College Parkway in front of the airport. We have tried over the years to find a way to rent it. Ideally, we would like to rent it for aviation purposes, The proposals we've gotten previously were generally not aviation proposals, and none of them actually materialized. We've now had interest, and this will be a later item on this agenda, for someone who wants to lease it for aviation purposes, but the problem is it doesn't have a clear pathway from that lot area to the active areas of the airport, taxi lane and access to the taxiways and runways. And so what we approached, airport staff approached Mountain West and discussed with them removing a section of their leasehold on what was used to be called the mobile El Aero lease on the south side of the airport, remove a section of their leasehold so that we have a clear taxiway through that, so we can actually go ahead and rent the piece behind it for aviation purposes. I negotiated with Member Golden, Michael Golden, not in his capacity as a member, but rather as the owner of Mountain West. And we looked at it a number of different ways to try and figure out how do we value this and how do we take care of this. I would note that preliminarily, the staff was not interested in committing the airport authority to expend funds on this. Our funds are better left in the bank and used as matching grants for FAA AIP programs. And so we looked at it from the standpoint of how do we value the area we're taking, the 17,000 square feet, and then what could we do instead of paying? And the other alternative is to extend the remaining lease by a number of years. So we went through a calculation and calculated the value of the 17,000 feet. One way to look at it is you just say, okay, what is the rent you're paying right now? What's the rent that's going to go away? That is not a very effective calculation. I mean, if it were my leasehold, I wouldn't think that that would give me a manageable number because I'm getting the property at a rate that I negotiated or was offered to me probably 30 or 40 years ago, and then it has had CPIs added to it, but it's still well below the current market rate. So we looked at other ways to value, and we looked at the net present value of the property, and we looked at, well, what is the comparable property currently going for? Now, on staff side, we were not eager to simply apply 64 cents per square foot, which is the current appraised value for the property behind it. And so we looked at other ways of valuing it. The bottom line is we did a calculation that's included in your packet that indicates using a 6% discount rate and just looking at what ordinary values would be, that it comes to about $33,000 that we're basically taking away from Mountain West. That would equate to 7 years of extension to the remaining lease. However, we didn't include any opportunity cost or anything that they could make off that property. That property is not just ramp area. It's actually marked in their lease, primarily, most of it is marked in their lease as buildable for hangars. And so what we're taking away from them is the ability to build hangars next to their existing hangar, which is something we really wouldn't want them to do because it would block this entryway, but it's something that's certainly in their right. As a result, there was some negotiation, and we agreed to 8 years extension, which I'm telling you right now, I think that is very conservative, very fair to the authority, and certainly would be higher if we were going through a condemnation hearing or something else where we were not working on a negotiated basis. So that's how we came up with the numbers. And so the end result is we're taking away 17,000 feet out of their leasehold. We're giving them an additional 8 years. It's actually 8 years and a month or something. 8 years extension on the remaining part of the lease. And we think that's a very fair result. And more importantly, it gives us the ability to develop the additional property, which is certainly an advantage to the airport, to whatever the new tenant is, and monetarily it'll produce, property tax on aircraft, property tax on improvements to the property, and overall help us develop the property. And so that's kind of a summary. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. But it's in its simplest form. It's basically, we're taking away a chunk of his property that's fairly valuable, and in return, we're giving them about 8 years extension on the remaining piece.
Okay, well, first of all, we'll open up this item for discussion with the board, and then I'll open it up for discussion from the public. Anybody from the board have questions or comments? Nope, most of us have had a chance to look at this pretty carefully. Anybody from the public that'd like to make a comment?
Good evening, Board. Bruce Carrod, Carson Tahoe Executive. Carson Tahoe Executive has assumed two 50-year leases. And with those 50-year leases, it is under our understanding that at the end of the 50-year lease, any investment improvements that we have made is most likely and typically going to revert back to the airport. Because as you all are aware, the airport has a financial responsibility to its stakeholders to get the highest yield and the best use, which generally that any hangar would then be reverted to the airport, where the airport could then lease it out for themselves and generate a higher revenue. So I do support, and Carson Tahoe Executive does, the expansion and the taxi lane that allows for this 2.4 acres to be developed. But I do not agree with the compensation, nor do I think it's fair. I do understand how the present value was attained, and that number of $33,114, which is conceivably lost revenue or a potential opportunity for business opportunities and revenue, again, for the tenant. However, the tenant has had 43 years to develop that. With their lease expiring in 7 years, conceivably, a year permitting, another year of construction, they would only have 5 years to to allow for any income and a return on this hypothetical hangar that would be constructed. So in my mind, you're theoretically not losing any revenue because there really isn't anything that can be gained there. There's significant areas that are already designated as tie downs, which currently none of them are utilized. So if, in my mind, had this opportunity for an extension not came about in 7 years, the airport would have looked at this parcel and said the highest and best use financially for the airport would them to take over the hangar and then rent it out for themselves. So again, Carson Tahoe Executive, we have assumed leases. We understand that after 50 years, most likely it's going to go back to the airport. And we are going to make an investment and start construction on a fuel farm, which is $1 million plus improvement to our property that, again, after 50 years, would revert back to the airport conceivably. I think that there can be an alternative compensation. I think 8 years is not fair, nor is it equitable. Again, $33,000 of hypothetical revenue that's lost on a corner parcel where if you did build a hangar, it'd be small because all the hangars to the west still need access. So with this, I think there are alternatives. Obviously, you could adjust the rent proportionally for the lost land. You could do a one-time payment or credit to Mountain West for that $33,000. You could also, you could then do a rent waiver on that area, but for them to allow them to extend a 50-year lease another 8 years and generate the revenue off that hangar just for giving up, let's just call it surplus land. And generally, I believe, and my understanding, is that most airports require an extension to require capital investment for an extension. And this is just undeveloped land that you're just giving back to the airport and you're getting $33,000 credit for an additional 8 years. So I think proportionally, the airport has to look at this for their long-term investment and then tying up this property for another 15 years when at the end of 15 years, most likely the airport is going to take this back. I think it is not treating other leaseholders, and I think it's setting a poor precedent that if you do not develop something and make a capital improvement, you can still get an extension of your lease. So I would ask the airport to consider another form of compensation than to just proceed with another 8 years for a parcel that hasn't been developed and is just surplus.
Thanks, Bruce. Would anybody like to comment? Would anybody else in the audience want to comment? Please do.
Good evening, Board. Chris Whitehead, Stellar Aviation, partners with CTE Group. I would like to acknowledge that the fact that the opportunity to develop that leasehold for the airport is obviously very beneficial for the airport, so we support that 100%. I would like to echo some of the sentiments of our partners with CTE concerning the lease extensions proposed to Mountain West. In simple terms, the fact of the matter is that 17,000 square feet is Mountain West is not losing anything. With that, is not revenue generating for them. If anything, they are. It's advantageous to them to not have to pay rent on that parcel going forward, in benefit of the airport to be able to develop that land. Developing that land adjacent to them opens up potential revenue for them in the future, not knowing what that development is going to be. I would also recommend that you consider the precedent that is being presented in the fact that you're extending a lease 8 years for a what you value to be $33,000, which essentially turns out to be about $4,000 a year. So if you're saying that the $4,000 of a capital improvement is reasonable for a 1-year lease extension, it sets a pretty dangerous precedent going forward. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Corey, we've had a lot of discussions on this because it is kind of unusual, and we were going back and forth, and we were discussing fair and equitable and right and wrong and precedent. We've discussed all that, and I was asking about the way the FAA would look at something like this as far as how you treat your tenants fair and equally and precedent. And you have done some research on that. Could you share that with?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a very sensitive topic in aviation, not just at this airport, but across the United States. All ground leases across the United States at general aviation airports have this language of reversionary clauses of what happens at the end of the lease. It is very difficult to overcome the requirements that essentially put the airport in a position where they have to revert that land. Ultimately it comes down to the airport must be as self-sustaining as possible. And there's usually no justification that can be found that says extending a lease is in fact the option that will make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. At the same time, if there is a pathway to that, it's in my opinion that as a government entity, we should try to enable the private entities to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. It's rare. It's hard to find. I think we have found a pathway with this item to do that. And I think that the airport should look for opportunities like this for future tenants who may want to try to find a way to extend their lease. The reality is it won't always be possible. The majority of the time it won't be. But I think that Steve and I have been able to work together to find a way a pathway forward to do that for this leasehold. The airport is absolutely gaining significant value that far exceeds what's listed here as the 33,000, because we'll be able to lease that parcel to the south, which is not a part of the financial analysis that's presented today. I think that the board should consider all of the public comments that were heard. They all made very good points, and this is a sensitive topic. So,
Thank you. Mr. Takis.
Yeah, I just want to respond to a couple of comments. I agreed with some of the comments that were made by CTE that ordinarily when we extend something, we include a requirement that there be some kind of improvement to the property. But here, it's just the opposite. Here, we're taking the property away. So it's not like we're extending something where there's still property there to make that improvement. It's really the reverse of that, where we're taking away the opportunity to do that. And the suggestion by Stellar that just not having to pay the rent should be an adequate compensation, I would be surprised if any tenant on our airport would say, oh, here, just take it back. I'm okay just not paying the rent on that piece. Everybody who's come to the airport, and this includes every tenant that we have to date, has paid an amount that represented the fair market value at the time they made the deal. And every one of those is significantly less than the current fair market value today. Property is becoming more expensive. And despite the fact there were a couple of dips, post 2006, the overall trend is very strongly on the way up. And so no one is going to just say, and certainly I wouldn't expect CTE, Stellar doesn't have a lease, but they operate under CTE's lease. I'm sure CTE wouldn't say, oh, here, take back some of our property. It's okay to take back some of our property and just reduce our rent. It just doesn't happen that way. The other thing is I had mentioned too, that this area that we're taking has the ability to build hangars. Maybe that's a bad example because the amount of time, as they point out, the amount of time left in the lease, you probably couldn't amortize your investment of hangars. But other things could be done, and it's a full FBO leasehold. They could put an airplane wash rack. They could put a lot of other businesses there that would not include such substantial investment, and it could be profit-making. And those were all opportunities that were either discussed with Mountain West, that they had ideas for development and ways to make money on it, and we're basically taking those all away. So, I appreciate the comments that are made, and like I said, I agree with some of the principles, but here, what we're proposing is extremely fair to the airport. I don't think it's setting any kind of precedent. Certainly doesn't mean anybody else can come in and get some high valuation, if that's what their perspective is, for property that's taking. And then the last thing is, what's our alternative? If we really want to develop that land, and Mountain West says, no, we'd like to hang on to what we have to do a condemnation. And condemnation gets extremely expensive. I guarantee you it would be way more expensive, and that would be cash out of our pocket expensive, not a trade for an extension of 8 years. And so every time I look at this and I hear an objection to it, I listen carefully because I'm always thinking, yeah, maybe we're missing something. And they raise good points. But on balance, I just don't see it. I think this is an extremely fair deal for the airport authority.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes. Mr. Rogers.
What authority do we have or don't have to do a condemnation? I don't recall that being anywhere in. I would just be curious whether that's ever been done and under what authority.
Oh, airports do it frequently. And now we have not done it. At one point, there was concern that we were going to do it on the property on the east end of the airport because it was in one of our master plans. Master plan, they give us all these alternatives. One of the alternatives is condemn some of that land at the east end so you can avoid the encroachment and those kinds of things. That did not work out well for us, just even having that option in our master plan. good folks who live on Apollo Lane and those other areas showed up with pitchforks and torches, and I don't blame them. They were worried somebody was about to take their homes away. But while we have not done a condemnation action here in Carson City at the Carson City Airport that I'm aware of, there have been many in the Reno Airport and other airports around here. And they are, as a public entity, the airport authority has the right of eminent domain. And the process is you announce that you're taking the land, you make whatever arrangements you can to pay, and if you don't come to an agreement, you end up in a courtroom. This is where it usually ends up, each side bringing their experts as to what the value of the land is. And just looking at this, I rather doubt there's a scenario that would play out where we would do better under that scenario than what's being presented here on a more friendly basis, on a negotiated basis. And
Thank
so
you.
it happens.
I'd like to point out that this was a little bit unusual, so I reached out to member Hutter and asked him to review it since he's a pretty savvy business person. And I asked him if he felt that there might be anything unfair about this or somewhere where the airport was being unreasonable or setting a bad precedent. And we had a discussion. It took a while to kind of go through all the details. And his comment to me was, after all was said, that he felt that it was a fair and equitable deal, is what his comments were to me. With that, would anyone be willing to propose a motion? No one wants to propose a motion.
I move to approve the amendment.
Okay. There was a motion to approve the amendment. All those in favor, say aye. I'm sorry,
Aye.
I need a second. Harlow will second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Anything else from the public?
I just want to make sure the record reflects that Golden was not participating.
And
in
Mr.
that
Golden was
vote.
not participating.
Yeah, I officially abstained from the vote.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that, yes. Okay. Motion passes. Moving on to item H2. For discussion and possible action, adoption of resolution and notice of invitation to bid to Carson City Airport lease located at the south side of airport, being 2.48 acres bounded by College Parkway, the airport parking lot, and the existing leases to the west and north of the subject parcel. Appropriate minimum lease rate and terms of lease and permitted uses set a deadline for bids and the date for the bid opening and consideration pursuant to NRS 244.283. This is basically the next phase of the previous item, where I'm going to let staff discuss this in a little more detail.
Okay, so on the airport, there is a lot of land identified as available for hangar development. And we received a notice of a party that is interested in bidding on this land for commercial use. So that triggered the process to lead us to where we are today, with issuing a resolution and notice to bid for this land. So this is initiating the process per NRS 244.283, which is the required process for leasing airport land. And it's going to be via public offering and sealed bid process upon adoption of resolution by the authority. This land has previously been identified for development for aircraft storage, hangars, and in the master plan, the land east of the fence line is identified as non-aviation use. It's important to specify that that land is not in the current ALP as non-aviation use, and that this will be subject to FAA approval during the approval process with the FAA. There's also another limitation on this property, and that is the access point to get to the runway from this area that's identified for hangar development is only 79 feet in total width. It is smaller than the design standard of the airport, which has a taxiway object-free area of 131 feet. So there are some limitations on this property that anyone who bids on the property should take into consideration. That being said, it is a prime location on the airport, especially for a FBO. And that's about all that I have. Steve, is there anything that I missed that you would like to add?
Just a couple of things. In the FBO uses, we've made it very broad because we want to get whatever proposals we can. We have left off fuel sales in it because we're concerned about there would be environmental issues trying to squeeze one more fuel facility on the airport. And so we've left that out of it. But other than that, we've put in, pretty broad spectrum for FBO activities. And I think that's about it. We've provided you with the draft resolution and the model lease, and the model lease, of course, has those FBO rights. And so if you approve the resolution also has timeframes so that we have a period of time where we can accept bids, and we also set that timeframe such that we can do a publication in the paper as required by law. And then you guys would be looking at those bids at your January meeting and determining the highest responsible bid, the one that fits the use the best and provides the highest rate. I would also note the appraisal on that area shows the property at 64 cents a square foot, which I had mentioned earlier is a current valuation. And so whoever's bidding on it needs to factor that into their business plan.
Thanks, Steve. Any members of the public would like to comment on this?
Board members?
Oh, I'm sorry. Board first? Harlow corrected me, Bruce. That's like the 5th time I've been corrected by Harlow in the last 5 meetings. Go ahead. Anybody else on the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
With respect to a possible motion, should this be approved, can we come up with some dates?
I think we already plugged them into the draft resolution.
Oh, I don't see them.
Oh, it's in the motion? Oh, I see, it's not in the motion. Yeah, I'm sorry. They're actually in the actual resolution, and the dates would be sealed bids by January 13th, and then the regular scheduled airport authority meeting is January 15th in 2025. And so that would be the date on which you open the proposals and either determine the award of the lease at that point, or if you need additional information, Nevada law allows you to postpone the decision up to, I think, 3 weeks, 21 days, so that you can gather the additional information. At that point, you would have a special meeting just to resolve it.
Any other questions or comments?
John, did you? Okay. Would now be an appropriate time to comment in support of this, Chairman?
Sure.
Okay. For the couple of decades we've been operating on the airport, we've seen this property sit vacant. It's really the cornerstone of the airport. It would be, when developed into an FBO, and I say when because we're fairly certain, as Corey mentioned, that there is a bona fide party who is qualified to develop this property into an FBO. That when developed, this would be one of the most visible locations on the airport from the road, from College Parkway. And on top of that, it would be one of only 4 locations where an FBO would operate that would have street side access. Right now, there are 1, 2, 3 properties on the airport, correct me if I'm wrong, that have that access, and that's it. This opens it up. It's really it could be a showpiece location for an FBO. And we've tried over the years to get a restaurant operator in there. We've thought about, get anything on that property. And as Steve mentioned, there's been no success with non-aviation use. So the opportunity exists to do something very dramatic in this location. And there is a party who's reached out to us that has made it very clear what they want to do. They have a plan, and we hope that themselves or somebody else would develop the property and generate a lot of additional revenue for the airport. So I think the airport authority ought to take that strongly into consideration.
Thank you, Michael. John?
Just for my clarity, is there going to be access to this property off of College Parkway? Is that part of the intent?
The access will be from the existing parking lot.
And then when was the appraisal accomplished? Approximately.
Let's see here. It's been within the past 6 months. I can't get more specific than that at this moment. I can find that information fairly quickly, though, if you'd like me to.
I do know that we had to hold off on this item because we didn't have the appraisal in place when they first contacted us. So I know it's fresh within 6 months. I want to say we got it in late June, but I could be wrong.
Okay. All right. I'll ask you that offline, Corey. I'll ask for that date from you offline. But it's just for my edification. Thanks.
That sounds good. There's one more thing I wanted to add to this, in that the limitations that I specified, I think should be added to the resolution and notice to bid. I think it should be completely transparent to the bidders of the the width of the taxi lane, and the fact that the land east of the fence is defined on our master plan as non-aviation use, but is not defined as non-aviation use under ALP. And I think it should be in the resolution, notice to bid, those items, so it's perfectly clear. And nobody expects to have the 131 feet available there. So I think that the board should consider adding that to the motion for staff to include that in the resolution.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, can I open it up to the public?
Good evening again, Bruce Garrod here. Definitely encouraged, look forward to seeing this RFP posted. Just in regards to the timing, crucial part of the RFP is having, or listing this property being available, is having a taxi lane. So that the lease was just amended for Mountain West. And I believe the Board of Supervisors has to approve all leases. So having this lease go before the Board of Supervisors in 2 readings, would this be able to still make a January meeting?
Yeah, it only gets 1 reading in front of the Board of Supervisors, lease amendments do. And we think there's adequate time to get that accomplished.
Got it. So most likely you're anticipating RFP responses at the January meeting as outlined?
Correct. The date in the resolution would be for proposals received by January 13th, I think it was.
Understood. Just need to
Well,
know
thank
how
you.
much time we have.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay. I'm going to call for a member to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve the draft resolution and notice of invitation to bid for the land located at the south side of the airport, being 2.48 acres bounded by College Parkway, the airport parking lot, and the existing lease to the west and north of the subject parcel, and that we include the language in the executive summary in the notice to bid, with a deadline for bids to be received of January 13th, 2025, and the date for the bid opening and consideration of January 15th, 2025.
Does that meet the extra items that you want to put into the, does his proposal meet that, Corey? That you want to put into the lease? Or should we mention that you want, as additional items you want to add to the lease?
I think it would be
RFP.
good to add, to direct staff to add to the resolution and notice to bid that the access point for this parcel to the airport is only 79 feet in total width.
Which is included in the executive summary.
It is included in the executive summary.
So that's why I said that should be fine. That should be fine then with the executive summary. Very good. Any discussions from the members before we vote?
I'll second that motion, Harlow.
Any other discussion from the public? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item H4 for discussion and possible action. Approve the FAA Airport Capital Improvement Plan, ASIP, 2025 through 2029. Please, staff summary.
Okay, so the FAA ASIP must be approved and presented to the Carson City Board of Supervisors for approval and submitted to the FAA Airport District's office. We are submitting the ASIP earlier than usual based on feedback we received from the FAA. So specifically here, there is an additional project on this ASIP than what was on the previous ASIP that was approved. And that is a master plan forecasting update. The FAA does not feel like we've presented adequate support for the runway extension focused planning study and 25% design. So this project will help us develop the additional support required to hopefully get the FAA's support for that first phase of the runway extension project. The master plan forecasting update will primarily look at the current aircraft using the airport and the potential aircraft using the airport in the future, and then the performance characteristics of those aircraft and how the extended runway is needed at our airport to support those aircraft. We've received letters of support from tenants who operate aircraft, and these letters have been submitted to the FAA, but they want something more from us. So this master plan forecasting update, in addition to the letters of support that we've received, will hopefully get us that support that we need to support this runway extension. This is a really good sign. Historically, the FAA has simply put off the runway extension projects. They continuously don't approve them, and we push them back year to year. The FAA has supported this project for this forecasting update. I think it's a really good indication for the future of the airport and hopefully in gaining their support for the runway extension. All of the other projects were on previous ASIPs, so there's nothing else new there except that the runway focused planning study and 25% design is a fairly substantial project, and since that's being pushed back, we were able to move up the pavement rehabilitation project for the main apron on the south side of the airfield. So we've been self-funding pavement maintenance on the airport in anticipation for the FAA approving the runway extension, in which they notified us they would not fund rehab projects if they fund the runway extension. This is an opportunity for us to get some federal funding to help with that pavement maintenance that needs to get done. In general, the FAA is really supportive of the ASIP that y'all are looking at now. And this is really good for the airport, as we are looking at potentially total of $635,250 of projects for federal fiscal year 25. And this was interesting. We brought the previous ASIP in front of the Board of Supervisors really not that long ago. They approved the projects for 24 and 25, but unfortunately, because of the new project, the master plan forecasting update, this will still have to go in front of the Board of Supervisors for approval. And that is all that I have. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Any comments? Any questions from the public or comments? If that's the case, then I'm going to call on a member to make a motion.
Well, Chairman Puletz,
Huh?
I'll move to approve the fiscal year I'll move to approve the 2025 through 2029 ASIP for Carson City Airport.
I second.
Oh, great. Any other additional discussion? If not, let's call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item H5. For discussion and possible action, approval of the annual audit report of the Carson City Airport Authority for fiscal year 2023, 2024. And that's our treasurer, John Rogers. Staff summary? Or do you want to explain it before the staff summary? What would you like to do?
Staff summary first.
Staff summary first.
Okay, so Casey Nealon has completed the annual audit required by NRS 345. The review and approval of the audit by the authority is required under the statute. This is approved annually. What y'all are looking at today is the draft financial statements. Historically, we have not approved the draft, but actually the final. We're doing it this way so that we can get this approved this month and not have to hold a special meeting next month. If there are any changes to this draft, then we would have to approve those changes. But as of right now, we don't see any changes taking place from this draft. And that is all that I have for the staff summary. At this time, I can go over the corrective action after John has a couple of comments about it.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Mr. Rogers?
My only comment is echoing what Corey said. We are not going to submit this to the state unless there's any changes from what this board approves today. So that's why we're asking for an approval in draft form. Corey and I have both reviewed this report in detail, and we agree with the data that's in it and with the findings that are in it. I think I will ask Corey to talk a little bit about corrective actions. There are some audit findings, none of which have anything to do with accuracy of numbers. But Casey Nealon, as we pay them to do, continually asks us to improve the level of control that we exert over our finances, because we are a state agency. And so we are in a unique position compared to previous years, where we have a little bit more staff, and we may be able to make some changes that would address some of Casey Nealon's longer-standing concerns. So I'll let Corey talk about that briefly.
So the findings, kind of in summary here, are that the airport could improve internal controls for the preparation of financial statements and financial statement disclosures. This is something I've already been looking at, and I believe that the airport needs more involvement from our bookkeeper. And the proposed corrective action for this is to request from our bookkeeper that they have a designated person assigned to the airport who can more closely monitor this and also participate in the Treasurer and I's weekly meetings. Hopefully, our current bookkeeper will be able to accommodate that. If they're not able to, we will look into more options. Also, the other findings have to do with errors or omissions and also checks and balances, and primarily with ACH payments and the ability to add and manage ACH recipients information. This is a very specific requirement that we have not been able to meet. These are repeat findings. So we've tried to accommodate this. We've tried to improve our checks and balances, but it has not been to the satisfaction of the auditors. So now the plan is to pursue additional software solutions that are able to accommodate checks and balances to the degree that they're looking for. There are some particular software companies that I'm looking at, but I'm not committed to any particular one at this time. I plan on having a follow-up meeting with Casey Nealon to figure out what solutions we can have available to us. So we can have these checks that they want us to have. I believe that through having updated software solutions and by having more involvement from the bookkeeper, that we will be able to improve on the findings that they specified. And that is all that I have for that portion, and I'm available for questions.
John?
I would say that our auditor would prefer if we had a CPA on staff, and that is not that's what we're trying to address with a closer relationship with our current bookkeeping firm. I don't think that we would end up moving towards hiring a CPA onto staff. I don't think that we're big enough to accomplish that. So hopefully we can find an agreement with our auditors that satisfies them. And then the last thing I'd like to say is I'd like to reassure the board that although the level of control on expenditures is not, our auditor does want us to improve that. I am fully confident that all expenditures that are accomplished at the airport in excess of $2,500 are reviewed and approved prior to them being accepted into our bookkeeping system and prior to any disbursements going out into the world. So we have a manual control system that has served us well for the entire time I've been treasurer. And so that's not an issue, but we will talk with the auditors about how to improve it to meet the national accounting standards.
Thank you, John. Any other comments, questions? Anybody from the audience? Nope. Well, then it's time for someone to propose a motion. How about you, Michaela, our newest board member? Do you know how to do it yet?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I can make a motion here. 1 second. I move to approve the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 annual audit report of the Carson City Airport Authority conducted by Casey Nealon.
Item has been seconded. Any more discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Very good. Move on to airport manager's report.
Okay, as y'all can see from this board packet, the majority of my time has been spent on the items on this packet. But in addition to that, the airport operations and maintenance supervisor is working on the next phase of pavement maintenance. he has reached out to Wood Rogers to look for assistance in providing guidance for the next steps for this project. The next phase of maintenance that we're looking at doing is crack seal of Alpha and Delta and a slurry seal or fog seal of all of Charlie and Bravo. And the scope of the project is going to be bigger than it has been in the past. We'll likely have to go out to bid, and we want to make sure the specifications of all of the products are to FAA standards. So we have reached out to Wood Rogers for assistance with this. This isn't enormously high on our priority list because none of this would take place until after winter. But it is important to start on it now because we'll likely have to go out to bid. So we'll need time for that whole process. The utilities have been put in place across Taxiway Bravo. The utility easement is in process for that connection to be finalized, and we don't suspect that there'll be any issues with that being approved.
Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I did find out today they're hoping for a certificate of occupancy by year end.
I think it's a realistic goal because those hangars are pretty much about done. They're going to have issues with painting in the wintertime on the interior. So this utility easement is actually important for that to be completed, but I don't know if that'll actually cause any holdups with the certificate of occupancy. So they're definitely moving right along, and they've expressed that they're moving forward with the third hangar to me. So hopefully we'll start to see dirt moving over there. Okay, working with the city on updating Title 19 with the changes approved by the Carson City Airport Authority. The changes of Title 19 have been approved by the Carson City Board of Supervisors. We've received the new snowplow, which we've already discussed on, and all of the snowplow equipment is prepared and ready for the season. We are working on a through the fence permit that has been requested for access east of Bravo. Hopefully we will have an agenda item prepared for the January meeting related to that. So I worked with board members, members of the community, and the FAA to assist with the development of a handout with guidance on operations at non-towered airports. The project is complete, and we are printing the handout for distribution. This project, I want to give special thanks to Larry Cheek with the FAA, who initiated this project. This is kind of the result of near misses and actual unfortunate mid-air collisions in this region. This handout will provide pilots with a very quick reference that they can use in the aircraft to make sure that they're making good radio calls relative to uncontrolled airports. A comprehensive lighting update report was prepared by Rick Lee, the Airport Operations and Maintenance Supervisor, and that is attached below. I will review some of that shortly. At a master project review meeting with the city, I learned about a neighborhood being built east of the airport. The neighborhood is up the hill from the airport, and because of the rising terrain, it could potentially cause an issue due to its proximity to protected airspace. I identified the risk to the developer and am in the process of executing a navigation easement to protect the airspace. This is a particular concern because only 70 feet above that neighborhood is not just a notice criteria airspace, but the actual protected instrument approach. If something encroaches that approach, it could potentially close the airport. So it's very good that we've identified this potential hazard, and the developer is really willing to work with us on this. I don't suspect to have any issues. Fuel flowage numbers are way up, 40% increase, 46% increase over the previous year. And operations numbers are way down at 50% 55% lower than the previous year. I haven't seen a spread this wide yet. So this is interesting. This is interesting to the point that I think we're missing some ADSB numbers.
Absolutely.
And Michael, you have something to say?
Yeah, the reason there is that spread, we have a new partnership with a company that is operating out of Elko with us, and they had to come to this side of the state. So they came in with air assets and were operating significantly out of the FBO last month. That's why you see the numbers the way they are. So
Yeah.
we're partners with this company, and you know they're a sister company of ours now.
Sucking a lot of fuel.
Yeah, they operate some pretty big aircraft, and they work hard.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw what they were using, but they work real hard.
Yeah, we've this definitely supports the trend that we're seeing, that the airport is being more utilized by corporate level aircraft and
Yeah,
larger aircraft in general.
Like I said, we have this company that we're now part owners in, and we told them this is where you're going. So that's just the way it is. So
All right.
okay.
Hopefully we already have a second ADSB transceiver standing by waiting for the SRE building to be built. Once that SRE building is built, we'll add this on that side, which is going to help us with the blind spot that we have on the runway, which will hopefully give us more accurate ADSB numbers. It's always important to remember ADSB numbers are not all inclusive of all airport operations, and they're also not 100% accurate. So, detailed report of the ADSB numbers is also attached. You can see the comprehensive report that Rick Lee put together below that. Back in September of 2022, we did a full evaluation of all airport signage on the field, and we were really deficient with our airport signage, and we've every year improved on that year over year. And this is now factored into our airfield maintenance budget. Initially, this was a capital project budget item, but now ours is built right into our facility maintenance or airfield maintenance budget item. And the airport looks way better because of it. And I think any of the pilots here would agree with that. Also, a big expense with lighting on the airfield is that a lot of the old halogen-based lightings systems in the signage that we have is outdated and discontinued. So we've had to do quite a bit of, Rick and Cody, have had to do a lot of retrofitting of the existing signage using LED lighting, and updating to LED lighting is fairly expensive, but it is the only option as the old systems are discontinued. There's also a bunch of other updates about airfield lighting that y'all can review. A highlight here is the airport beacon. So AT&T has historically always provided the airfield maintenance of the airport beacon. We recently had the airport beacon go out, and AT&T refused to complete the maintenance on the beacon. And there is no documentation that required AT&T to do that. The reason they've always done that is they built the tower, and the tower is covered in wireless equipment. So they have always maintained it, but it's really just been a handshake deal. It was never formal. I'm working on correcting that. The AT&T's lease is due for renewal, and I've requested that in their renewal language, they include language that the AT&T would perform that maintenance on the beacon light. And I also included that the airport would fund any expenses they incur for parts. I think it's only fair. It's our beacon. But if they performed that maintenance, that is the bulk of the expense. With the issue that we most recently had, we incurred over $3,000 in expenses to get the beacon up and running again. That was almost all labor expenses and equipment rental expenses. So hopefully we can get this issue resolved with AT&T and move forward with an option that is in everyone's best interest, because the reality is AT&T is the only company that's truly qualified to be doing that level of work on that wireless tower up there. So hopefully we can all come to an agreement on this. We received a complaint after we got the beacon working again, and it was a valid complaint. The new bulb that was put into place in the beacon light was actually slightly taller than the old bulb. And what that did is it messed up the alignment of the beacon, and the beacon was shining lower than it should have been. And you could actually watch that light go along the park to the northeast of the airport, which it should have been above that. So I appreciate the comments from the homeowner who notified us of that issue. It was a valid complaint, and we were able to get it resolved right away. And the maintenance company was provided with all of the explanations and equipment from the FAA on how to do a proper alignment. And it was completed, and it was completed to their satisfaction. So we got a comment next morning right away that it had been resolved. So, all right, that is all that I have.
Thank you, Corey. Any other questions for the airport manager? Legal counsel.
Just want to add one very small part to the aircraft beacon issue. I think the airport manager completely has this in hand and is on the complete right track. The history behind it is we had a beacon. AT&T came to the airport and said, we want to hang some antennas on it for our cellular service. And so we made a deal with them and said, okay, look, if it's structurally sound for that, we'll lease you some space on it. If it's not, we'll give you the right to rebuild the beacon tower with a more structurally sound setup, and you will be obligated to move the light to the new beacon tower. They ended up taking that secondary option and building us the tower. And that's one of the reasons we have a tower now that can support up to 4 wireless carriers with their antenna equipment. And so they actually built it, and in the initial years, they held the registration with the FCC for that tower, and so they were doing the maintenance and doing all of that good stuff. Eventually, they woke up and said, hey, how come we're doing this? You know, we built this for these guys, and they're making money because they're hanging all kinds of other people's antennas on this thing. And so that's kind of how we got here today. But like I said, the airport manager's on the right track. You know, the big picture is this has been a great thing for us. It's generated good revenue. It's provided service to the community above and beyond the beacon to the airport community. When the beacon was first put in, we had a similar lighting problem. And the mobile home park that's just to the south of the airport, the beacon was set up, and I swear to God, it looked like you were watching an old movie with a concentration camp and a light going through it. And those people were really nice about it, but they let us know. And again, we corrected the angle of the light so that it didn't do that to them. So it doesn't surprise me that when they put in a taller bulb, we had a similar problem. But that's kind of the story behind the airport beacon. It's a really good thing. Our old beacon we gifted to Silver Springs Airport. I don't think they ever put it up. I think it's still laying on its side. If you fly out there, I think you'll see it laying out there. Or maybe they sold it to someone else. I don't know. Anyway, I don't have anything else to report from a legal standpoint.
Thank you, Steve. We now have treasurer's report.
You have the numbers in front of you. As in previous years, our staff is doing a very good job of managing our finances. There are no issues in there that are worthy of mention, except for we do have one minor error in there where we've miscoded rock sales. That will be corrected prior to next meeting. I'd like to mention that that they're showing currently under the sales category. I think it's worthy of mention that we at the start of next year, we will start the budget process for the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st of 2025. And the first time that the board will get a look at a preliminary budget will be in the February meeting.
Thanks, John. That brings us to, are there any comments or reports from authority members that would like to be shared at this time?
Member
Yes.
Pulis?
Yes.
Quick question for John, even though we've kind of closed out your report. And maybe this is just because of the way the calendar is, but how come our real property tax revenue is down? Is that just because of where we're at on the calendar?
Unfortunately, we don't amortize the budget item for real property tax. The budget
Okay,
number is the full year number.
Understood. So
And
we're not at
so
full year.
It'll only be accurate at the 12th.
That's what I thought.
12th month.
Okay.
Yep.
And then just a comment to my fellow Airport Authority members, if you haven't taken the liberty to take a look at our new snow plow and the new plow blade on the tractor, I would encourage you to do so. After all these years, we're ready for some of the worst snows that this airport's ever seen with the equipment we have. It wasn't too many years ago, former member Hamilton, myself, and Chairman Pulis were out on a Saturday at the airport plowing snow using private vehicles and what we had kind of hobbled together with airport equipment. And what we have now is just light years ahead of what we were doing a few years ago. So when you're driving by, just take a moment to look at it. Nice equipment, worth the wait.
Yep. Anyone else? No one else?
Chairman Pulis.
Yes.
In previous years, we have made a conscious decision about whether to have a December meeting or not. And so how do you feel about that?
I think I want to go with tradition. What do you all think? Do we need to have a motion on that, or can you just agree to that?
What is the tradition?
Not to have a December meeting.
We always have it at the newest member's house. Isn't that? No, just kidding. Just to make a motion on that, that's the determination that you as chair can make.
Very good. Unless there's an objection, we'll go ahead and stay with tradition and forego our December meeting.
I like that idea.
Okay, very good. Public comment? David, you've been very quiet out in the back there. Okay. We don't have any specific agenda items prepared yet for the next meeting, but we will get those out in a timely fashion. And with that, I'll go ahead and I will call this meeting adjourned.